know if you all heard him because you got to get this mic close to your mouth. His question is relating to the advisory committee budget. There's an allocation by the state legislature of around $53,000 a year for each advisory committee, and he's got some questions about that. We're going to be talking about that more, Michael. It's very important stuff. I'm not going to be able to answer the whole thing right now, but we can talk about it later, and you can learn a lot more about it later. And we have some people here who really know that. So I really know it, and the other one who really knows it is Cindy Calderon, who's the president of Seeker right now, and you know, Janet Canterbury, Janie Whiteford. There are plenty of people here who know about the budget. So we can help you with that. It's very important stuff. That's a struggle in many counties. It's a real struggle in many counties.
That's going to be one of the breakout sessions, the next hour and a half.
Oh, great. Great.
John, I'm Bonnie Newman from Calaveras Home Care. Could you enlighten me, how and when and why was there a distinction made between family members caring for family members and non-family members? I'm talking about in terms of wages and the deductions that are taken, because family members don't have the same kind of category as non-family members.
I'm going to have to ask somebody else who knows about that. Shirley, is that something you know about? I don't actually know about that, what the differences are, but Janet does. That may not be wired right now, Janet.
Hello. Am I on? Okay. Yeah, I actually know a little bit about it, and there are IRS regulations regarding the deductions and how is a close family provider defined in terms of workers' comp and unemployment and FICA. And I think the FICA difference is the main thing. Fran, do you know more detail on this? And I just want to finish, and before I hand it.
It's not a state issue, it's an IRS issue, and that's all I know.
Yeah, and I remember working on this like 10 years ago in San Bernardino, and we never got anywhere with it, but there shouldn't be other distinctions between family providers and non-family providers. It is a political issue because, you know, in the legislature, one of the things that you hear from people who are opposed or who want to cut IHSS is those family providers should be taking care of that consumer or nothing. Okay, so that's the difference. So when people begin to split it off like that, you know, it's your job to come to say, you know, that's not true. We are all consumers, we're all providers, and we're taking care of our loved one, whatever. But that's a divide and conquer argument that the other side uses all the time, and they have for years.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Diane Leal. I'm from Calaveras County, and I wanted to clarify something on the advisory committee composition. You said it was required to have 2 providers, and is that based on an 11-person advisory committee?
Two of the 11.
Okay, if you have 11. So if you don't have 11,
Oh, I don't know about that.
Could you repeat the question? Put the mic up close to your mouth.
Sure. The question was on the advisory committee composition slide he went over, that he definitely said it was required to have 2 providers, and I wanted to be sure that that was for an 11-person committee. If you had a lower number, 7, 8, 9, are still 2 providers required?
Lower number. I think you always have to have half of your advisory committee has to be consumers or past consumers of personal care assistance, not necessarily IHSS, just personal care assistance. The other one would be like it would be lowered.
Okay, so 2 is not required if the total number of teams is lower.
Yeah, the other thing to remember here is that you have an ordinance that defines your county, and you also have the state law that John is talking about. So the way to get that answer for you is to check both your ordinance and the law that John is citing there.
I
And
have
your
cited
bylaws, yeah, I'm sorry.
at the bottom of that, I've cited at the bottom of this, the Welfare and Institutions Code section, and I've told you at the end of this presentation, the very last slide, is resources for further information. And one of the things that you can get there, the last one is called the California Code, and it says www.leginfo.ca.gov. And that's where you can get a copy of that Welfare and Institutions Code section and read it for yourself. But we can talk about it. I think it's kind of a gray area. Okay, so I just talked to a guy. There's 4 people on the advisory committee in Ventura County right now. They don't have a full complement of people. So how are you going to have a majority consumers and 2 providers? I mean, the idea is that you've got an 11-person advisory committee. I don't think anybody's going to get in trouble if they got a 6-person advisory committee and only 1 provider or something like that. You kind of have to take it on an individual basis. Now, there's other counties. I will say this, Diane, that a county can have fewer people than 11 because it says, the statute says no more than 11 on the advisory committee. So you can't have a 20-person advisory committee, but you can have a 7-person advisory committee. Yeah, I don't know who raised their hands first, and I'm probably about out of time, but
We'll take 2 more.
I'm going to go back to this lady right here, and then I'll take you up there.
Well, I'm really glad to have this opportunity to get this question answered because so far I haven't been able to get an answer. I'm president of California United Home Care Workers Union, and we have many rural counties where they've gone to a third-party consortium and they have disbanded their whole advisory board, and we want to help them get it back in place. And they say they don't have to, so that's my question.
We'll work with you. We want them too. We need those consumer voices.
Absolutely, there's a lot of abuses there because it's not in place.
Now, I guess you're talking about like MODOC and Mono. Okay, okay. So I know, for example, like in Nevada Sierra, but they have a consortium of 3 counties, Plumas as well, where they have 1 advisory committee for those 3 counties. A lot of the smaller counties, they just can't come up with enough people or something. So that's why counties have to do it according to their own way. But that doesn't mean that they don't have to have an advisory committee. So we'll talk to you. That's a job for SECA and the unions.
Georgia Morales from San Diego. Who writes the bylaws for our advisory board? Do we? Do the board of supervisors? Does the public authority?
I can answer that too.
Yeah, Janie, go ahead.
You write the bylaws as your advisory committee, but they are accepted by the board of supervisors.
There's a lot of help. That's the kind of thing that SECA can really help you all with, because other advisory committees, one of the things about this whole thing about IHSS, the IHSS community, often people, they don't like to share. They want to keep things private. That's mine. You can't have it. I won't get credit or something like that. I've never seen anybody turn anybody down to share any of their information. And so anything you need about bylaws or anything like that, there's a whole bunch of people around here and a whole bunch of public advisory committees who are willing to share with you.
It's not the law that the board of supervisors has to be the governing body. There's one public authority, and that's San Francisco, where the advisory board is the board, and they are the governing body. And they're the only county like that. And I'm sure we all wish we could do that, but, and of course they still, so the public authority negotiates the salary for the union, but of course the city and county of San Francisco still has to approve it, but they are not the advisory board is the governing body in that one county.
Okay, what Mark brought up is something that I generally don't talk about because it's confusing to people. But when I said that I made the general statement that counties are given some latitude in deciding how they want to set up their public authority and the advisory committee and so on. In other words, choosing the form of governance. What Mark is referring to is that a board of supervisors has a choice. Do they want to have themselves be the governing body of the public authority? And in that case, if that's true, since these are two different entities, what you'll see in a county is they convene as the board of supervisors and then they adjourn as the board of supervisors and the same 5 people convene as the public authority governing board. They do that kind of stuff with water districts and mosquito districts and so on too. So they convene as a separate thing. And that way, then they have the Citizen Advisory Committee. Another choice that they have, which Mark was bringing up, is actually, Mark, it's San Francisco, Nevada Sierra, Los Angeles, and Marin County are the 4 that have a citizen governing board. In those counties, the Board of Supervisors says, we're gonna go ahead and have the citizens, we're gonna appoint citizens to be the legal authority over the public authority. So that's LA, and like I said, San Francisco and Marin and so on. It's only those few, and really, they're responsible. Of the things that we've talked about here, all the responsibilities are the same, and I just say advisory committee and don't make a separate distinction about it.
Fran wanted to say something?
Well, I want to get back to Mark as consumer control, but I need to come up there, okay? Will you let me do this? Yes.
Trust me.
John. This is Mark. All of the IHS services are to help Mark, right?
Use the microphone.
This is Mark. He's the consumer. IHS services are to come to him and help him live better. John is the governor. Mark, would you come up and be the Department of Social Services? Would you do that? Yeah. Stand next to John. He's your boss. He appointed you as the Director of Social Services. This is Janie Trueheart. She's the social worker. She loves consumers, and she's going to go assess Mark and see how many services he gets and how many hours he gets. And this is Janet, and she's the supervisor. Okay? Now, governor doesn't like people like Mark. Likes people who drive SUVs, likes big oil companies, likes big corporations. Mark doesn't pay taxes much, do you, Mark? No, actually he does, but not to suit the governor. So the governor doesn't value people like Mark. Department of Social Services is full of good social workers who went to school to be social workers. But he tells them how much money they can have, and he tells them how they're going to divide it up. And he tells them, come up with a set of guidelines so every consumer in the whole state gets assessed the same way. That's your job, to make sure that every county complies with his rules, right? You got it. Janie comes out, meets with Mark in his home, and says, what do you need help with? What can you do by yourself? She looks at Mark, she takes the guidelines, she goes back and she writes up his plan. And she gives it to her supervisor to approve. And her supervisor has been told by the county department director, you're only going to have so much money, you've got to divide that money up between all the Marks in the whole county. So, from the top down, we start thinking ration hours, ration money, cut it as thin as you can. It's not what Mark wants, it's what Mark needs. Well, you would say, who else can determine what Mark needs but Mark?